Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tina and I'm the Capability Building Coordinator for Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. Connecting Up is a part of the Info Exchange group. Info Exchange is a not-for-profit social enterprise that has delivered technology for social justice for over 25 years. With over 100 staff across Australia and New Zealand, we tackle the biggest social challenges through the smart and creative use of technology. I'd like to welcome you all to the webinar Office 365 Implementation Considerations, which will be presented by Marcus Harvey from Info Exchange. We'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. All lines are muted, so if you have any technical issues, please type it into the questions box on your webinar panel and I'll be able to assist you through there. If you have any questions during the session, please also type it into the questions box and Marcus will answer them in the Q&A section at the end of the webinar. Please note that your comments and questions will not appear to the entire group. If you're on a Wi-Fi connection and have multiple programs open, this can sometimes affect the quality of the audio and video of the webinar. If possible, please close all other programs to help you have the best experience. Please note that the webinar is being recorded and a link to the recording and the slides will be sent to you shortly after the webinar ends. Before we start, I'd also like to remind you that there will be a short survey at the end of the webinar. We'd appreciate it if you took a few minutes to provide us with some feedback. That's all from me for now. I'll hand it over to Marcus to get things started. Thanks, Marcus.
Thanks, Tina, and welcome everyone. Great to have you in the webinar for this Office 365 implementation considerations. I'll just put my webcam on so you can see me and see that I am a real person, very keen to engage with you all. If there are questions, please don't hesitate to type them into the comments box and Tina will bring them up towards the end. I will pause my video just to make sure that I don't distract you and you focus on the slides. You will get the slides at the end. Tina will send them out to everyone, so don't worry that you need to take screenshots or anything else. What we're going to do today is really talk through if you're going to implement or extend your use of Office 365, what should you consider and what are the key things that you need to think through. First of all, I want to talk about what the main options and inclusions are, because not everyone is aware of the different components of Office 365 and what we suggest non-profits think about when they're designing their Office 365 environment. I always get amazed by the number of organisations that don't understand how much is free within Office 365, and you often get a whole lot more without actually paying any more money. And so I just want to talk through that because that's the first step in getting the most possible value. Second thing is I want to talk about the importance of clarity on why you're using Office 365, because it has so many different components that it becomes very easy to get lost in the permutations and combinations and disperse your effort. Being really clear on what you're trying to achieve and what's important for your organisation and how it needs to use IT is critical to getting value out of Office 365. And to be honest, critical to getting value out of any of your IT investments. Think about what your organisation needs and then think about how IT can help support that. I want to talk a little bit about each of the different elements in more detail. Not every component of Office 365, but the main ones, so Exchange, SharePoint, Yammer, Skype, Teams, etc. Because each of them during the implementation phase have different considerations you need to think through. And that's really important to make sure you scope and get value out of the components as you roll them out through the organisation. Building the business case is another important part because even if you're using the free components of Office 365, your effort to implement it isn't free, or it doesn't come, it's not an unlimited resource. So thinking about the value, making sure you're clear on that, taking your executive on that journey is really important. Some key infrastructure considerations. Office 365 might be in the cloud, but you do need to think about what you've got locally, whether it's servers, whether it's your internet connection, to make sure that what you're implementing will work effectively. Then I want to talk about privacy and security, because from our perspective, the best time to think about securing your information is before you go live. It's always a lot more effort to retrofit and fix things that you should have done differently in the first place. So getting that right up front is key. And our top tips for success, to make sure that if you're on that implementation journey, you get it right, and some other resources that we've certainly found value in, and you might as well as in time for questions. So as I mentioned, don't hesitate to post in the comments or the chat box, and Tina will take notes of questions, and we'll go through those at the end, or interrupt me if there's anything critical that we want to start with. All right, let's get cracking. First of all, I wanted just to talk through the main options for Office 365. So all non-profits that we work with pretty much pick one of these three, or sometimes do, or often, not just sometimes, often do a mix and match, because you need to pick what is your core. And what we do recommend is don't mix and match too much, because then the management overhead gets higher, but try and keep things simple so you understand how things are working. The first thing I want to talk about is the Business Essentials and E1. Now, that is a donation license for non-profits that are considered charities by Microsoft. So you can have up to 2,000 users on the E1 or Business Essentials license, and that provides Exchange Online, OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams for new tenants, Skype for older tenants, web versions of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc., a terabyte of OneDrive storage, email contacts with a 50, calendar, etc., all the normal Exchange functionality with 50 gigabytes worth of storage for your mail, online videos and meetings, instant messaging, audio, video conferencing, the ability to develop a SharePoint intranet, Yammer for social networking, planning and work management tools with Microsoft Planner, and digital storytelling with Sway. So that provides for many organisations the core of their collaboration functionality, and that's available at no cost to non-profits for up to 2,000 users. For organisations that decide to use this, they also often decide to purchase Office desktop applications for each PC from Connecting Up. You can get Office Standard for $43. That includes desktop versions of Word, PowerPoint, Excel, Outlook, etc., and which really brings the or works really well with the back-end functionality of Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, etc. So that's a really useful base for the core of many organisations' non-profit staff. If you have volunteers, Microsoft changed the licensing model about 12 months ago, I think it was, and volunteers that don't do jobs within a non-profit like a paid staff member are now asked or are now expected by Microsoft to get an E1 volunteer license. That's unfortunately not free, as it says. That's $270 per user per month. But the Business Essentials and E1 donation really provides that core. What we find organisations doing that don't want to go down the Office standard desktop licensing model is that they either pick Business Premium or E3. So Business Premium is $410 per user per month, E3 is $610 per user per month. Now, Business Premium is limited to about 300 users. It includes everything in Business Essentials, plus the core Office desktop apps, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, etc. And each user can install those apps on up to 5 PCs or Windows PCs or Macs per user. So I install it on a home PC for when I just need to intermittently access some information on there. And it also gives you an optimized experience on phones, etc. So I've got Office installed on my mobile phone as well. So Business Premium is the second option that gives you those Office apps as well. And the nice thing, particularly if you've got a geographically dispersed workforce, is that those applications are updated automatically. So every time there's a new release, whether you're going from, whether you're on Office 2016 moving to 2019, as that happened recently, all that just happens in the background. There's no need to centrally manage that. E3 is for $6.10 per user per month, gives you everything in Business Premium with no limit to user numbers and a range of additional features. So what we find is that organizations that want more advanced business intelligence solutions, want more advanced archiving, auditing, discovery, legal hold, mail audit rules, or information management data loss protection rules, will go for the E3 at an extra $2 per user per month. Because if you've come from a corporate background and expect that large audit management capability, that's really available in the E3 licensing, not available in the Business Premium or Business Essentials / E1 licensing. So a lot of those extra more central management and control of information and information rights is available within the E3. You can mix and match these as much as you like. So we've got plenty of organisations that pick Business Essentials for a certain team of staff and then go E3 or with another group, and so you can mix and match these to get what you need and make sure that your staff can work as effectively as possible for as little as cost. So the first thing is in implementing Office 365 is think, what core licensing am I giving my users? Is it Business Essentials, E1, Business Premium, or E3? And what's the reason behind that, i.e. how do my staff need to work? And what management and control features do I need to have available for me? Because that's really critical to then getting the value out of it. As I mentioned briefly, the key reasons we see organisations going beyond the free E1 licensing are things like Office Pro Plus, because it gives you those desktop licenses installed by each user on up to 5 devices. That eliminates the upgrade effort every few years, but allows you to maintain a consistent software version. Mobile apps for advanced editing of Word, Excel, and PowerPoint documents, whether that be on your tablet, on your phone, etc. The advanced email, legal hold, archiving with unlimited storage, etc. And very strong discovery and compliance tools to allow you to find information and get what you need. Business intelligence is the other big thing in terms of making sure that your staff can get interactive dashboards, getting information from multiple sources. I do want to talk briefly about the other less commonly known options and services within Office 365. Because when you're thinking about implementing Office 365, it's important to have a vision for how you're going to move forward. And so on the left-hand side, we're just listing a bunch of applications which are all available. Pretty much or each of these have the core available at no cost. And then a few services that are worth keeping in mind that may well be appropriate for some or potentially even all users. So Microsoft Flow is a fabulous little tool that allows you to create workflows between applications and files and data to automate some time-consuming tasks, allowing staff to focus on getting value out of their Office 365 environment, and automating things wherever possible. Microsoft Forms are comparatively new and really coming to the fore. It's really now for those organisations that are using the free version of SurveyMonkey, for instance. It has a lot of those features without some of the limitations, and allows you to create surveys and quizzes, polls, send them to people both inside and outside the organisation and see results in real time, as well as do that analysis. The functionality of Forms is being built out significantly, and we're going to see more and more features come. So it's a nice little tool that brings it within the Office 365 management suite. Microsoft Planner allows you to create project plans, organise and assign tasks, share files, chat about what you're working on, and get progress updates so that you can keep track on how key activities and project plans are progressing. Microsoft Power Apps is a great little tool that allows you to build mobile and web apps with data in your organisation. So you can build a little tool and distribute it out for people to download onto their mobile phones to capture some simple data and then move it into a structured list with workflows around that, supported by Flow, etc. Stream allows you to share videos and presentations. Yammer is what I like to think of as a corporate Facebook to connect organisations or connect people across your organisation and share information across teams, irrespective of project or team boundaries, and really organise and collaborate across an organisation effectively, as well as Power BI. For analysis and sharing insights. I think from memory we're running a Power BI webinar in about 4 weeks' time. So if you're interested in how do you analyse your organisational data, share insights, produce dashboards so that you can track your KPIs, check out the webinar program at Connecting Up, and we're doing a whole lot more on Power BI next month. From a services perspective, the first one I want to mention is EMS-E3, Enterprise Mobility and Security Enterprise 3 license. And the reason that's really important is non-profits get 53 licenses for EMS-E3. So if you're on Office 365 and you're not using EMS-E3, you really should grab your 53 licenses and see what it can do for you. It gives you multi-factor authentication, information protection, Intune for improved device management, and it really allows you to ratchet your security up a level. And certainly for those organisations that are focused on how do we make sure, as every organisation should, make sure the information is secure, it provides a whole host of tools that allows you to do that effectively. EMS-E5 is like E3, but it's pretty fantastic in terms of it's got some really smart preventative analytics and strong security controls and reporting to keep that information safe. And Office 365 E5 has all the features of E3, plus advanced security, analytics, and voice capabilities. What we're starting to see now is organisations actually decommissioning their PODXs and moving voice into the cloud as well. And E5 or E3 or E1 with some voice add-ins is now making that a very viable alternative for organisations that want that integrated environment. There's also all the standard applications that organisations know in the Microsoft suite, Microsoft Project, Microsoft Video, and that really enables organisations to bring everything into the one Office 365 suite. So that together really gives you the core of what most organisations use. And the first thing in thinking about how do I implement Office 365 is be really clear about which applications you're going to use and be clear about why. and also about what your rollout timeline is, because the other thing that we recommend is don't do everything at once, do things in a staged manner. So be clear on what stage 1, 2, and 3. Don't just think, oh, all this is really interesting, I've got to do it all at once. Everyone will just get lost in all the different options. So be clear on what's important. I'll talk more about that in a minute. The key thing, as I said earlier, was the more you're clear about why you're using Office 365 and what you want out of it, the more your implementation will be successful, because you then think about what's critical and how do I need to support staff, and which components do I need to use in what component. So if you want to reduce admin and management overhead, then maybe you're interested in internal processing, business processes, forms, workflows, and those components. If you want to develop dashboards to track your KPIs, understand your outcomes, maybe it's business intelligence. If it's improving collaboration, maybe it's document co-authoring, or distribution lists, sharing calendars and contacts, or your project management tools. If you want to improve client communication, maybe it's Skype or Teams for video conferences, storage of client information within client portals, and ensuring that you're sharing the information effectively. If you want to enable your staff to be mobile and work out of the office, then it's potentially moving from a file share and working with SharePoint or Teams and synchronizing documents locally onto a desktop. Or if it's improving staff comms, then it's about how do I enable point of presence so that people know when people are available, and you can get discussion boards and group communication happening and reduce that email overload, or reducing risk by improving password security, mobile device management through that EMSE3 licensing I spoke about earlier, or enabling cloud-based storage and considering additional backup components. So being clear why you're using Office 365 is absolutely critical in thinking through your implementation and what your sequencing is and which components. Now, the great thing about Office 365, but also the frustrating thing about Office 365, is that there's lots of different components. And organizations will often come and talk to us about, well, what should I use? Because there is so many elements. And so what we recommend, don't use everything for everything, be really clear. Staff should be able to keep in their heads, this is what I use and this is why. So don't have a list that's too extensive, or organizations will struggle with all the different options and not be across how they can get the best value out of it. So for collaboration and document management in small teams, we suggest Microsoft Teams. For discussion and collaboration in groups, either Yammer or Teams, so be really clear on that. Large organizations, we suggest Yammer. Smaller organizations, we suggest don't touch Yammer, just use Teams for that collaboration environment. So it very much depends on org size, and because different applications, Yammer versus Teams, both have some overlaps but also have some differences. Obviously, sharing, booking calendars, exchange online and resource groups, intranet, document collaboration for staff and or boards of organizations, we suggest Teams and or SharePoint. Business intelligence and KPI and our analytics, Power BI, messaging and video conferencing, Teams is the recommended. Skype for Business for those that are still using that. If you're still using Skype for Business, please be aware that you will have to move from Skype to Teams over the next little while, as Microsoft is depreciating or forcing everyone to move through to Teams. Storage of individual documents with and collaboration in a limited sense. OneDrive allows that. Forms, lists, really basic lists and databases, SharePoint. Anything more complex, we suggest an application for that. So for instance, we do not suggest SharePoint for client and case management. There are plenty of other better options out there. And project management really is working well these days within 365 Planner. So being clear about what different application you're using, helping staff get through the uptake and familiarity with using it is really important, particularly when we've listed here that there's multiple options. Try not to implement more than one option for your organisation. Try to be really clear on this is what we use, this is why. Don't force staff to try and remember which one do I use, because they'll end up picking the wrong one, and then your information starts to get diluted and dispersed and people can't find things. And what helps you with that is being clear about what the reason is you're using. So from a business case, and even if you don't have to write a formal business case for Office 365, being clear on the value helps you communicate to those that decide where the resources go, why you've got value out of your Office 365 implementation, and that then helps you build the case for more IT projects or greater change. So if you want to reduce or eliminate server upgrades and refreshes, that's how we've seen a lot of organisations justify the effort in moving into an Office 365 environment, because that saves both IT support and server costs. Organisations that have dispersed locations often can get significant savings using Teams for video conferencing and reducing travel costs, travel time, and enabling staff to have a whole lot more flexibility with meeting attendance. Depending against hardware failure, reducing hardware maintenance and warranty costs also helps you to reduce your hardware cost and failure risk. The collaboration, one of the biggest needs we see these days is in organisations that are looking to collaborate more effectively when they're out of the office. So that might be collaborative document co-authoring, so that multiple people can work on the same document irrespective of location, or it might be being able to do it without emailing that document around, so you're not worried about who's got the current version of the document or merging different sections back in. So that's been a real boon and a real need that we've seen organisations asking for, particularly because a lot of staff are working out of the office more often, as well as creating that single source of truth that reduces the need for staff to spend time looking for files in different locations. The biggest challenge is, how do you move forward with Office 365? Whether you're just thinking about your journey, you haven't yet started, whether you're partway through, you might have just done email or a bit of Teams or a bit of SharePoint, or you might be looking to go towards the next step. You might be, you've done the core and now you want to go, okay, I really want to ratchet that up and get value out of it. And so what we see many organisations do, not every, but this is a common project approach. So obviously, initially it's business case approval, development and approval, and make sure you've got support. Because the worst thing to do is say, I want to do Office 365, but I'm not going to, it's going to be done in my spare time, and we don't need to, I haven't looked, but I'm sure that it'll run across my slow internet. That's a recipe for failure. And so making sure you scope for success is critical, scope for success and getting approval for that. And so that's really what the business case approval is about, as well as the review scoping environment prep. So making sure that you've scoped it and you've designed for success. Often we'll suggest, particularly in larger organisations, and if you're making a change to the way staff are going to work, there may well be value in a pilot demo or testing to get staff familiar with the new way of working. Then the first step we often find is let's get your users up into the Office 365 environment. Let's get authentication working. Let's get your internet upgraded at your site or sites if required, depending on what you're looking to use. So, making sure that, you synchronize. If you've got local user infrastructure, you push those users up into the cloud and appropriately secure those. Or if you need to do a migration from an existing non-Microsoft environment, that you get that authentication, user data across is critical. Then it's about migrating your email and Microsoft Teams for instant messaging, video conferencing. That's usually the first thing we do. If you're working in an old version of Microsoft Office, often it makes sense as part of that stage 5 email migration and Teams to also do an Office deployment to bring yourself up to current version, particularly if you're intending to use SharePoint for file sharing and collaboration, because the newer versions of Office do work more seamlessly in terms of sharing and collaboration with Office 365. Point 6 is then let's look at OneDrive and SharePoint or Teams. Let's do the design and information architecture to make sure we know how things are all going to hang together, and then roll that out in terms of how is it going to work. Let's make sure that if you need it, you explain the OneDrive desktop tool for synchronizing documents offline for work when you're not connected to the internet, and make sure that you support staff with appropriate change management and training. The bigger the expected change is from a staff perspective, the more you want to make sure that you provide staff with the support they need, whether that be training, whether that be with a demo environment, or whether that be with some one-on-one for those staff that are really busy and used to a quite different environment. But making sure that you support that change management is critical to making sure you get to the other end and you get value out of the environment. The other thing is that organizations often want to get value from, and what we do say is, do the things of greatest value first. Don't just take this common project staging approach and go, no, we're following that. Think about what offers the greatest value, get some quick wins. So if that's OneDrive so that staff can work effectively offline and share files, think about that. If that's Yammer for collaboration or video, then that's what you should be looking at. If one of your biggest challenges is how do you do business intelligence and track your KPIs and monitor your organizational outcomes, then maybe you should be looking at Power BI. If you really need a telephony systems upgrade, then maybe you should be rolling out Voice. If it's how do you manage your projects and they're comparatively simple, or collaborate and track time, then maybe it's Planner. So make sure you think about where the value is and focus on that when you're thinking about your Office 365 implementation. Don't just go the standard, I do email first, then I'll do my intranet, then I'll think about OneDrive and document collaboration, etc. Do whatever's of most value first. If you're thinking about an email migration, here's a quick summary, and I'm not going to go through this in too much detail, of your different options. So first one being Outlook / client-based. That's manual but can be performed by users, and it's usually good for small organizations. Non-technical staff can do bits of it. For anyone that uses POP, we had a call from an organization that was just using POP email, which we hadn't seen for a little while, and this is the best option for those sorts. But hopefully, best for small organisations, less than 30 PCs using POP email. IMAP migration supports a wider range of email platforms. You can do an email-only migration. IMAP doesn't support the calendar contacts task migration, and it's best for those organisations that don't need that type of information transfer. Good for Gmail or other non-Microsoft mail system migrations. Cutover exchange being the third one. Good for a fast cutover, e.g. over a weekend. You can get 5 to 10 gigabytes per hour, so over a weekend you can push a fair portion, a good portion of data through, and assuming you've got a solid pipe, and that's good for organisations with technical server expertise to configure that cutover synchronization and making sure that you get your email pushed up, and it does do calendar contacts and all those other things as well. There is a raft of third-party migration tools out there. And because this has been going for a while, cost per user, generally $10 to $15 per user from a price point perspective, and those third-party migration tools will take a lot of the effort out of that migration. It's good for unreliable servers, so if you've never patched your server, don't attempt to cut over, would be my comment. Because you've got such a lot of effort just to bring it up to supportability. And a lot of them have fairly friendly user interfaces. You don't need to do staging, you can do transfer of email contacts, etc. And then you've got hybrid deployments where you've got some staff on local exchange, some staff on 365, and you do that over a longer time period. That's good for larger organisations. 100, 200, we've done 6,000 odd users in a hybrid deployment, because you can stage that over several months and move groups in at key stages across a longer time period. So there's a quick summary of your core mail migration. I did want to talk quickly because, as I said, the great thing about Office 365 is that there is lots of different options in terms of tools. The bad thing about Office 365, lots of different options. And so this little graphic here on slide 12 just shows you the different options for collaboration and helps you to think about, okay, so what should I or shouldn't I use, and how do I help my staff get the most out of Office 365? Because giving staff too many options means that they're going to get confused. Don't roll out 5 different options for 5 different things all at once, because everyone's just going to get confused. So you'll see here there's a time sensitivity on the left-hand side, vertical axis. There's collaboration tones from formal, informal, and both on the right-hand side. And there's broadly how wide the audience is individual, group, team, department, or across a large organisation on the bottom horizontal axis. And this is intended to help you think about what tool do I use. As you can see, you can use Outlook for pretty much everything, but what we do recommend is implement solutions to reduce that email overload is really critical. And so if for instance, you'll see Yammer is a good informal tool used across an organisation. So if you're an organisation, that's a great way of doing it. Office 365 video is a more formal organisational collaboration tool, particularly for larger organisations. Teams is good, what a surprise, for collaborating informally within a team. It can also work for formally as well. SharePoint team sites are a more structured, formal collaboration at the team and the department level. And so thinking about what you're trying to achieve helps you think about what tools should be used in what situation. And that's really important to giving users clarity about what will work for your organization. The other thing that's really important is thinking about what type of staff you have. And this shows some broad generational preferences. So this is not black and white. Don't take it as, every organisation is different, and you need to adjust this for your organisation and what staff like. But for instance, as a rule of thumb, if I was working with an organisation and I didn't know them in much detail, and they said to me, well, Marcus, we really need we want to roll out persistent chat across our organisation, and we've got a bunch of baby boomers, people born 46 to 64. I'd say, maybe Teams and persistent chat is not the right thing for your organisation, because baby boomers don't generally like that. Or if you came to me and said, Marcus, I really want to roll out online meetings and videos, and we've got a lot of millennials, then I'd go, yeah, that will often work well. Millennials will generally prefer, that virtual online meeting, no video, or even some with a meeting with video as well. But some millennials will prefer face-to-face meetings, and so you need to think about how you manage that and how you support that transition. And so what we do like to say is, well, if you've only got baby boomers, be careful about team workspaces. If you've only got Gen Zs, give people more options than just email, because often the Gen Zs will like persistent chat, conversational user interfaces, virtual online meetings. And so think about, for your organisation, what type of staff you have and how you then support the 365 toolsets to make the most of that. Because getting traction within your organisation really means that you need to think that through and then design your change management program to support that. Teams is great because it does provide a lot of tools, but it's also quite different to just the old email. So Microsoft Teams brings together some key elements, immersive environment for instant messaging, group chat, file sharing, calendar. If you signed up for a 365 tenant in the last 6 months, roughly, it might be 4 to 6 or so, you wouldn't have got Skype. You only get Teams these days, and so all of this comes out of the box and it's just turned on. And it really brings that persistent chat, file share, calendar, instant message together, integration with Calendar for a team. If you move to Zoom because you couldn't handle Skype for video conferencing, Teams is very Zoom-like, and so it's certainly worth a crack, or a revisit, because it does give you that immersive experience. And so for all organisations that we're working with at the moment, implementing Office 365, we work through, okay, which components of Teams will you use? How are we going to use it? How do we support that rollout? SharePoint Online is, it actually sits behind the document sharing of Teams, but it gives you a whole range of additional tools. Company intranet, file server replacement, local storage, although not all file types are supported, so it depends on exactly what you've got. So for instance, if you've got complex databases, we don't suggest that they're sitting on SharePoint Online. Gives you forms and lists for admin processes, and you do need to be really clear in designing information architecture for SharePoint Online to make sure that what you've got will work well. From an infrastructure, the other thing I say is, just because you move into the cloud doesn't mean you need things locally. And so, as I was mentioning earlier, we do recommend for certain organisations, the larger you are, the more likely you are, and the more likely you have a large site with lots of users, the more likely we are that we suggest you have a local server. For directory synchronization, better redundancy, reduce time lags, those sorts of things. Internet connectivity is absolutely critical. I'll talk about that in the next slide. Thinking about how you manage your PCs and your laptops, either through mobile device management or other like tools, and making sure that if you need VoIP for telephony or phones, or CRM integration, all those are considerations you need to think about in your infrastructure. So thinking that through is really critical. Don't just go and move into the cloud, I ignore my local infrastructure anymore. It's a holistic environment, and what you need is needs to be designed depending on how you work. Really quickly, we often get asked, so how fast should my internet be? The short answer is as fast as you can afford. But this slide just gives you some broad guidelines. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but it'll be in the pack that you'll send out afterwards, just to show, for instance, if you've got 30 staff, 20 in a central office, and then 10 across some remote offices, a 10 meg link is likely to be good enough if you're just using email, Skype, and SharePoint for some file sync. If you've got 50 staff though, you're going to want more than that. And so it really depends on how many staff at each site, what you're using it for, and then as to what you need. What we're seeing more and more is fibre is becoming more cost effective to get out, but if you're putting voice or other data network traffic types that are very dependent on quality of service, you need to think about your network infrastructure to make sure that that's managed. I did mention earlier, and I do want to spend a couple of minutes on security because we're seeing more and more organisation being challenged by phishing emails where organisations are attempting to, or people are attempting to trick individuals in an organisation to divulging information, whether it be username and password, whether it be to do a bank transfer to an incorrect account. And so we're seeing more and more organisations being targeted for phishing and other security targets. So the first thing we recommend is think about what your security culture. Do staff understand how to spot a phishing email? If not, we need to support that training exercise. Do you have strong, complex passwords? If not, that's a number one thing to address. Do you have a use of technology or similar sort of policy on what should be stored where, how you should, don't share passwords, make sure that you don't leave your computer unlocked in a public space, all those sorts of things. What to do about public Wi-Fi to keep your information safe. So all those things are critical, and that's the first thing you should focus on. Second thing, as I mentioned earlier, the 50 free EMSE3 licenses are really valuable to enable risk-based reporting and monitoring. All right, the EMSE3 also gives you Intune for mobile device management. If you haven't already, and we do this by default, or we recommend this by default for all organisations, roll out multi-factor authentication because that's the best way of securing your tenant and your environment. I do want to quickly talk, given we've time, I want to allow a little bit of time for questions. So if you've got any, please jot them down now or whack them into the chat area so that Tina can pummel me in a couple of minutes. Designed for security from day one, as I mentioned earlier. Windows 10 domain join Azure Active Directory domain services is a great option for smaller organisations. Because it really allows you that single sign-in without server infrastructure, which simplifies stuff for users and for IT administrators. Implementing the most valuable, I mentioned this earlier, part of Office 365 first is the number 3 tip. Often it's Exchange and Teams. Other areas, SharePoint and BI later, once we've got that under control. Number 4, explain the benefits to staff and make sure that they understand how to get the most out of Office 365. Identify local champions to help staff make the most of the new features and to give you an entry point into each office and make sure you keep your finger on the pulse and understand how staff are going with any change. Ensure your internet bandwidth and reliability is appropriate, especially for video or file sync, etc. Because if your intranet's not up to scratch, you're going to have a really bad experience. And there's not a whole lot you can do. So check that out before you do any significant changeover, because if you're in an area, remote, country or rural particularly, or outback, it can be cost prohibitive to get a decent internet connection, and you need to design other solutions, not just move everything to the cloud. Upgrade to 2016, 2019 Office version on your PCs as part of any implementation, particularly to make things far more seamless. Use an expert to make the transition a success. If you're not confident, there's lots of little gotchas depending on your local infrastructure, and making sure that you're working with someone who's been through that before will help you smooth that. Consider local storage if you work with large videos or have small, poor internet connectivity, because that really addresses a whole lot of issues, and reduces complexity. Ensuring each application you implement has a clear purpose. I think I've mentioned that a few times today, and that it adds value to your staff and your organisation. Otherwise, people get confused and aren't really clear about what I should use when. There's so much in Office 365, it's almost a case of if you turn everything on at once, you're almost guaranteed to fail because everyone's just going to get confused and there's too much change. And roll out in stages. Don't try and do everything at once. A range of different support and additional advice and DIY workshops, etc., available here. The Microsoft site's great. The connecting up webinars and some readiness assessments are available there as well. And so, you know, the webinars and the resources on that page are a great way for you to get more out of Office 365. I'm going to throw it back to Tina and say, do we have questions and what else has come up through the webinar that I haven't covered adequately?
Yep, so we've got a question. Does Biz Premium have Teams and SharePoint?
Yes, Biz Premium does have Teams and SharePoint. Both of those are included. Very happy to report that.
Yep. Okay, so outside of that, we haven't had any other questions come through, Marcus?
Fantastic. Look, Tina, thank you so much for the opportunity. Again, I hope everyone on the line that you found that useful and you know, it gave you more of information about how to get the most out of Office 365 and implement it successfully. I wish you well on your journey. If we can do anything more to assist, don't hesitate to yell out. Where you know, Info Exchange and Connecting Up have been around, you know, for many, many decades, and we're really keen to help every nonprofit get more out of their technology. So yeah, don't hesitate to yell if there's anything we can do to assist. And I'll hand back to you, Tina, to close out.
Great. Thank you, Marcus, for presenting today. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope you've all learnt a lot from the presentation. If you do have any questions that come to mind later on or any feedback about the webinar, please send that through to events@connectingup.org and we'll be able to answer those questions offline. Don't forget that the recording will be available on the website very shortly and a link will be sent to you. So keep an eye out on your inbox. Again, thank you for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your day and we look forward to seeing you all next time. Thanks, Marcus. Thanks, everyone.